welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Like you've already seen, I have the fortune of talking today to two very accomplished coaches, and Kevin Neeld and Brijesh Patel. They are the co-editors of Strength Training for Hockey, which was recently released along with the NSCA. Very excited about talking to both of these guys here today about this, about the book, about specifically strength training for hockey. Kevin, which just joined us, is currently the head performance coach for the Boston Bruins. He previously worked for the San Jose Sharks as well as the USA women's hockey team. Brijesh has been in the field for over 20 years and is currently the Associate Athletic Director and Director of Athletic Performance at Quinnipiac University, working with all 21 varsity sports with a focus, it looks like, on basketball, but also ice hockey, as we're going to talk a lot about today. So again, thank you so much to both of you for spending part of your day here. I give the listeners a little bit of information about you, but I always think it's more interesting to hear directly from you. So if you could, each of you kind of tell us how you got interested in hockey or started training hockey players, where your interest in strength and conditioning originated, and what your journey has been like to this point in your careers.
You want to take the lead there?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I got to say congratulations to Kev. He was recently awarded the NSCA Professional Strength Coach of the Year. So Kev's been a longtime friend. I'm proud of him, and congratulations. And there's really nobody better in professional sports than Kev. So I'm just proud to acknowledge him live in front of everybody. So how did I get involved in ice hockey? I mean, I was fortunate. Like, I guess I can start here. Like, I knew I wanted to be a strength coach when I was in high school. When I was a senior in high school, and I went to University of Connecticut. Fortunately, I had a lot of really good role models and really good mentors at the University of Connecticut during that time, and they kind of took me underneath their wing. And one of those people, Sean Windle, he got me connected with Jeff Oliver and Mike Boyle. And so my first real experience working with ice hockey was with Mike Boyle. And that's where I really started to develop a passion for training those athletes and the sport itself. I never grew up playing ice hockey. I mean, I probably skated like 5 times in my life before I'd started working with ice hockey. So, but I really valued their blue collar nature. I loved how they worked. I loved how serious they took to training. And when I got back to the University of Connecticut, and then when I was a GA, I got women's ice hockey as a sport. And so that was my first experience, like training ice hockey year round, and I loved it. And it was a great experience. And at that point, I started to realize, I said, as I move along further in my career, one of the sports I'd really like to be able to specialize with is ice hockey. Basketball was the other one, but it was ice hockey. And then throughout the steps that kind of took me from my professional journey, working at Holy Cross and eventually at Quinnipiac, I always had the opportunity to be able to work with ice hockey. Whether it be the collegiate level, professional development, when we do summer camps, all those types of things. And so coming to Quinnipiac, it was really nice to be able to, work with men's and women's ice hockey, but also with programs that had aspirations to compete on the national stage, and being able to recruit athletes that had aspirations that they wanted to play professionally, play on the national level. And it's been a rewarding experience being able to be here for 17 years to see the growth, not only of our program, but all the people that have come through the program as well. So that's a little bit about the journey, about ice hockey too. It's one of those sports. It's unique. It's unique. I tell the athletes every single day, I think it's the most frustrating sport that you could possibly, play. I mean, the fact that you're on a frictionless surface, you're on a 1-inch piece of steel, you have to manage and maneuver a puck that's about 3 feet away from your body while somebody else is trying to hit you and knock you over with weapons in their hands and on their feet. So it's an extremely frustrating sport that requires a lot of physical attributes and qualities, as well as mental attributes too. So it's one of those things. I love being able to train those types of athletes.
Very good. Yeah, that's very, very complete. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
good. And
I kind of came in a different direction. I fell in love with the game of ice hockey when I started playing as a kid, and probably around my early high school years, I had an opportunity to play for a coach that was, a little bit ahead of the curve as far as putting an emphasis on off-ice training. And, For me personally, I kind of had this transformation from a short, fat, slow high school hockey player to what I think realistically is probably a still short but marginally less fat and slow high school hockey player. And it just the training process and this idea of just honing your craft and spending time away from formal practices and the opportunity that has to lead to significant improvements and changes in a player's path, it just grabbed me right away. And I knew at a pretty early age that I really wanted to pursue a career in helping hockey players fulfill their potential. And I at the time kind of had on ice and off ice aspirations in that regard. And I had an opportunity to go to UMass Amherst for grad school and interned with a guy named Chris Boyko there that worked with the hockey team that, was the one that actually introduced Brijesh and I back then. We determined what that was 2008. But
and then 2000, I think it was 20 because there's a Holy Cross, so might have been 2006 to 2007.
Okay, yeah. Might have been 07 then. But I think that he also introduced me to Eric Cressy, who I had an opportunity to intern with between my first and second year of grad school there, and that really was kind of my fork in the road moment of pursuing strength and conditioning as a career over any on ice skill development or just actually coaching the sport of hockey. But when I finished up at UMass, I had an opportunity to work at a private sports training facility called Endeavor Sports Performance in New Jersey. And that facility really had a great core foundation of hockey players as part of their business. And, there were some players that were playing juniors and transitioning into Division I college, a couple pro guys, but a ton of youth players. And, I think I just was fortunate to have that opportunity early on where, I was able to work with hockey players, as from 10 all the way up through the professional level. And, each one of those age groups brings different challenges, but it's a lot of fun and I enjoyed them all. So, during that stretch too, I was connected with Mike Boyle, as a common theme between B and I think, Mike has had a profound influence on both of our careers. And Mike brought me in to help with USA Hockey with the women's national team. Was fortunate to work with them for 5 years. And at the tail end of that, I had an opportunity to go to San Jose as an assistant strength and conditioning coach with Mike Potenza, who's another mutual friend of Brijesh and mine, and was there for 2 years, learned a lot, had a great mentor in Mike Potenza to kind of show me the ropes at the professional level, and the opportunity in Boston came up, and I was just fortunate to grab it and have been here for 7 years.
Well, yeah, congrats to both of you on everything that you've accomplished. Sounds like the journey has been like very rewarding, very complete for both of you. So congrats to both of you on that. And I did know about your award, Kevin, ahead of time. Thanks to Brijesh for mentioning that. But I did want to also congratulate you on that and kind of ask, like, when you found out that you were getting that honor, getting that reward or award, what was your reaction when you heard the news, and how does that really put your career into perspective?
Yeah, I mean, first, thanks to both of you. Brijesh is quick to point out, this year for me, he was actually the college strength and conditioning coach of the year award winner last year. So, he's obviously an incredible coach in his own right and has been an incredible mentor to me. I think that the theme in my life is I've been surrounded by really good people that have pushed me and led and showed me, what it takes to continue to develop and become as good as you can be. And, I've learned a lot of that from Brijesh over the last decade and a half that we've known each other. So, to answer your question, as far as, what I felt when I got that news, really just a little bit of disbelief. I think there's so many people that I look up to and so many great coaches in hockey and outside of it that I've had an opportunity to work with that it just doesn't really feel real that, I was the one selected. But, I think more than anything, I just feel gratitude. I still consider myself early in my career, hopefully. And, again, I just reflecting back on the path that I've taken and, how many great people I've had an opportunity to cross paths with along the way. Obviously Brijesh is here now because we had this great opportunity to serve as co-editors for this Strength Training for Hockey book. I mentioned Chris Boyko, I mentioned Mike Boyle, Mike Potenza, Eric Cressy. With USA Hockey, I got to work side by side with Anthony Donskov and Sarah Cahill. The staff that I worked with at Endeavor was unbelievable. And, I think I get questions now, which is, maybe a sign that I'm older than I think I am. But, people are asking for advice on how they can get into pro hockey or, how they can become qualified candidates for more desirable jobs. And, my feedback is always to find great mentors. And, I look back again on my career and I've just been fortunate to be surrounded by great mentors the entire way. So, I think this recognition from the NSCA is really a reflection of all the great people that I've had an opportunity to work for and work alongside over the last 15 or so years that I've been in the field.
Very good. And so I guess maybe all of that kind of leads into this. How did you two kind of come together to, be named as co-editors of this and kind of help put this resource together?
Yeah, I don't really know how we got selected. We got an email from the NSCA, and I don't remember the wording of it, but essentially that we were selected to be co-editors for this for an upcoming project that the NSCA and Human Kinetics wanted to put together for Strength Training for Hockey. And I think I texted Kev right away. I'm like, "Did you get your email? Did you get the email?" And he replied back, "Yeah." And I'm like, "This is a no-brainer." Yeah. Like, this is an opportunity to be able to kind of put something together selfishly, and incorporate a lot of our friends, colleagues, mentors that we admire in the work that they've done, and put together a product that's going to not only benefit, coaches that train hockey players, but also at a youth level. It's going to benefit athletes, it's going to benefit parents, it's going to benefit youth hockey coaches. It was like Kev said, grateful before. I'm beyond grateful for, the individuals that get to work with on a daily basis, but also for all the people that have helped me get to the position that I'm in now, but also to be able to be recognized that, as somebody that's helped put such a, hopefully an influential product together that's going to help athletes and coaches for years to come.
Yeah, you can go ahead, Kevin.
No, I was just going to say, I think Brijesh and I have both been pretty active as writers over the years. Brijesh had has had a couple websites that he's written a bunch of articles, both for his own site and then published on others as well. And, I think this opportunity to serve as an editor was unique for both of us that, we're kind of in a different role in this process. And, for me and, Brijesh and I talked about this early on too. I think for both of us, it was kind of a neat opportunity for us to be able to, it's not us producing the content as much as us having an opportunity to pull in a lot of the great people that we have a lot of respect for, that, that we've worked with, learned from, collaborated with in the past, and really tap into their expertise in showcase that through the book. And, I think that when you look at the author list and the contributors for each chapter, it's really an incredible group of coaches that both B and I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And, I'm really proud of how it turned out. And a lot of that is just built on the expertise of the authors that we were fortunate to have as contributors.
Very good. Now, getting into more specifically some of the content in the book, something that Brijesh mentioned at the very beginning is how unique a sport like hockey is. And I've always thought, just being a fan, I never played, but I've always had tremendous respect for hockey players. I mean, you have to be able to skate well. You have to be able to, have the skill to play the sport. You have to be physical enough and powerful enough to be able to play a very physical sport on top of skating. It's just also impressive, especially for someone that hasn't played the sport. So given all of that, what are some of the specific areas or nuances that you have to look into to specifically train a hockey player?
Kev, why don't you start that one off?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you and Brijesh have both talked about all these different areas that can impact a hockey player's game. I think from my perspective, there's a couple different ways to look at that. One of which is that there are a lot of different things that may allow a player to be successful. There's some barriers that may impact a player's ability to compete at the next level. And, we kind of view my role as identifying, which physical qualities are most limiting and which physical qualities are most impactful potentially for a player to make improvements in, and how is that going to translate to their game on the ice. So, I think if you kind of start at the top and look at the movement quality, as a general rule, higher caliber skaters adopt lower skating positions. That means they need, a little bit more ankle dorsiflexion, hip flexion, hip abduction, more extremes of hip rotation to maintain those low positions. You need to develop sufficient muscular endurance through the lower body and hips to be able to stay in deeper skating positions. Obviously speed and acceleration are both very important qualities to help win races to pucks and create separation on the ice. Power comes into play in shooting and giving and absorbing contact. Strength is important for winning battles along the boards, and even just from a durability perspective and being able to withstand contact. And then from a conditioning perspective, it really runs the full gamut. I mean, hockey's a little bit of a repeat sprint sport, but there are different requirements for certain players on the ice where they may be up and down the ice going at a pretty high clip for 20, 30 seconds consecutively. So, when you look at some of the lactic capacity type qualities, those are important for hockey as well. And then, the aerobic system obviously impacts the ability to recover from in between max effort sprints, but then even more at our level, especially to just endure the day-to-day stress of playing 3.5 games a week and the travel and everything that's associated with that. So, I think and you guys both alluded to this earlier, what makes hockey so unique is that there's so many opportunities across the entire spectrum to work on specific physical qualities that can impact a player's game. And, I think for us, we obviously at the NHL level, you have the highest skilled players in the world. So there are certain players that rely on their skill and their decision-making, their ability to read the play more heavily than others. Others are a little more physically gifted in the traditional sense. They can skate really fast. They're strong. They're well-conditioned. So, it's a matter of trying to understand where is a player's time best allocated from a physical standpoint, because there's a cost to training. The reality is that, training is an input that then is a stimulus for some sort of adaptation that you're hoping to create. And that adaptation comes at a cost, both in terms of resources and, a recovery timeline. So we have to be very judicious in where we're asking players to spend that time and to incur that cost. So, as far as what hockey players need, it's really they need to be pretty well balanced across the entire physical spectrum.
Okay.
I think Kev hit on every key point from the physical side, as you mentioned. And one thing I'd like to probably kind of address, and I think it's important in any sport, but I think I see it a little bit more because of the athlete that I see at the collegiate level, it's the mental and the psychological side of things. And there's massive benefits that you can get from consistent training on a regular basis, because the college model is much more a development model, right? Like, we typically play 2 games a week. It's going to lend to a little bit more training. It's going to lend to a little bit more consistency and routine development. But the biggest thing that I see, and I think that plays a key role in not only success, but also their ability to achieve their goals, is their mental fortitude and their ability to handle adversity. And I was talking to an old hockey coach, and because we have basketball here too, and we share in the same arena. And Kev, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but it was an interesting point that he said to me. He's like, why is it in basketball that in any moment of adversity, you can just call a timeout and stop the adversity? And I said, you know what? I never really thought about that. Like, if you ever watch basketball, anybody down here that watches basketball, a team can go on a 10-0 run. You're turning the ball over a couple times in a row. You can just call a timeout and stop the momentum. In hockey, you have one timeout a game. And, if you try to ice a puck, you try to throw the puck out of the boards, you get penalized. You get penalized for a play to try to avoid the discomfort, or when a team's, just rolling lines at you and you feel gassed and you feel fatigued, you get penalized for it. So there's a huge psychological component of the training process that can be developed through the training process of understanding how to handle adversity, how to handle challenges, how to handle competing on a regular basis that that I know that serves us extremely well, because we don't often have the most skilled players. And so that psychological piece and that component comes into play a large portion of the time.
That's really interesting. Something I honestly hadn't thought about. I mean, it's right there in front of us. I suppose we could all see it, but it's something I hadn't thought about in terms of being able to, stop the game at any point that you want, just to kind of reset or fight through some of that adversity. Something that you mentioned, Kevin, kind of made me think about more of the biomechanics of the sport. Now, I can train a sprinter, like a track sprinter, or a sprinter, maybe football or some sport like that. But in hockey, it seems like we have to look more at like the stride and the glide that you're going through in just the movement. That's something that caught me off guard a little bit when I was trying to learn more about it. I had a couple of hockey players then that wanted to train. So how is that different in terms of, I guess, training for the biomechanics of something like that compared to other dryland sports?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some, I think hockey, obviously the skating stride is a little bit more of a lateral push-off movement. Even crossing over, you're pushing under. There are elements of that in shuffle patterns in basketball and, in soccer as well. So, I think the crossover pattern is probably more prevalent and specific in hockey than you see in other sports, but it's the horizontal force application, the lateral and push under patterns that I think are a really a foundational part of skating and moving in ice hockey that are maybe a little bit less common in other sports. And then even the extremes of thoracic rotation and the velocities that players are moving at through that pattern is, maybe similar to most similar to baseball swing and shooting and lacrosse, but you don't see those patterns as much in other sports like basketball and soccer. So, there are some unique elements obviously to hockey, and the single leg balance and stability component that you are gliding on a thin skate blade on a slippery surface. And if you're not familiar with hockey, the skate blade itself is actually contoured front to back so that it's arced, so it curves up in the front of the back. And I have a 7-year-old that's playing hockey now and a 4-year-old that just started a learn to skate program a couple weeks ago, and that's one of the first things that they have to learn is just how to center on that blade. You go too far forward, you fall on your face. You go too far back, and you lose your feet out from underneath you. So, finding that center of pressure and being able to maintain stability, especially as you ascend the levels where the speed is picking up and there's more contact, is important. So, as you can imagine, there's a very high degree of that skill needs to be developed on the ice. But there are some different things that you can work on off the ice to help improve single leg strength and stability and body control and awareness that creates a foundation to help players transfer that ability on the ice better.
I think the other key thing to think about from a biomechanics standpoint is impulse, right? In being able to produce a force over a greater time period because of the of the surface of the ice being frictionless, right? And so much of your success in being able to skate faster and a little bit more powerful is being able to produce force over a greater time period. Whereas like in basketball or any kind of field-based sport where you're going to have a coefficient of friction from the ground, it's going to be much more based on your reactive ability, and you don't necessarily have to produce as much force over a larger amplitude or range of motion. In hockey, that's a key predictor. I think Kev talked about it before in terms of like stride length. Like it's a key predictor or key determinant in your ability to move faster and move a little bit more powerfully.
Something I wanted to get into a little more here, and it might lean more towards periodization or how you structure your strength training programs, is I'm looking at the length of a hockey season. Now, it can be pretty long compared to, maybe some other sports. You're starting in September. If you go for pro, at least if you go into deep into the playoffs, I mean, you start to get into June, which means that you have a pretty short off season there. So in terms of off-season training, what does that kind of look like for hockey?
Kev, why don't you go? So this is about like pro first initially, and I can talk about the differences.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously for us, we don't know how long our off season is going to be until the very end. So we always we have an understanding of, hockey is a sport, like we talked about earlier, that requires, the full spectrum of development of different physical capacities. And so the off season, it's important to really make sure that you're addressing everything. But given the limited time that we have in certain off seasons, it's also really important to make sure that we're developing and specifically spending more time addressing whatever may be the most prominent limiting factor for a player. So, for us, we tend to have, roughly 5 different training tracks that our players will go through in the off season, just based on what we're viewing as their largest needs from a physical standpoint. We'll develop, 5 different off season programs, and then within each one of those, for players based on injury history and movement limitations, we'll make exercise selection adjustments. But hockey is, especially at this level now, everybody's coming in prepared. So, you can't really afford to, enter training camp not ready. I think that's something that's really changed a lot, even in my time in the industry, that, there was a little bit more of using training camp to play yourself into shape. And, I think now everybody needs to come in prepared, because the reality is you're in there for a couple days, and then we start preseason games, and those are opportunities for players to showcase that they deserve to earn a roster spot. And if you're not ready for that opportunity, again, potentially 3-4 days into training camp, then it can have a significant impact on your future with the organization. So, I think the off season is incredibly important. And for us as a staff, it's just a matter of making sure that we're putting the best plan in place to help players make the most of it.
Yeah, our goals aren't going to be that much different than what Kev talked about. Like, a lot of the off season is going to be built towards preparing, but we do have an idea of how long our off season is typically going to be. For women's ice hockey, it's going to be typically anywhere from that the minimal, it's going to be 16 weeks. At the max, it might be 18 to 20 weeks, depending on how long our playoff run is going to be, because there is a dictated endpoint of when the Frozen Four is going to be. From the men's standpoint, it could be anywhere from 16 weeks up to 20, depending on our playoff, right? So we have a large amount of time to be able to prepare. And the biggest way, I think the way I look at it, just maybe a little bit differently, is we utilize our off season to try to increase our athletes' ability to tolerate stress. And everything that we do is from a training standpoint, is going to be a stressor. But when you work with college level athletes, they're going to experience so many other stressors, from academic stressors, from social stressors. This doesn't happen too often, but financial stressors. But everything is going to be ultimately a stress that's going to cost them upon their body, like Kev mentioned before. So what we use in the off season is we want to make sure that we dose enough physical stress to increase their ability to tolerate the stress when it comes to in season, so they can handle playing 6 days a week, skating, training, going to class, maybe not eating the highest quality foods because you got to eat in the cafeteria. Handling all these other types of stressors, so they can become a little bit more resilient as along with helping them develop their own qualities so they can perform.
And I think something you just mentioned there kind of makes me wonder, even for the listeners, about the in-season training. I know that you just talked about, the stresses of going to class and practice and all of your games. Kevin, for you, the travel schedule and the number of games that you play in per week. I heard at one point that at least at the pro level, because of the schedule and all of the travel, that hockey players would essentially come off the ice with their bodies already warm and get in a quick strength training session right then, so that they can get on a plane and fly to the next city. So given both of your perspectives, how do you approach that in-season training for them, making sure that they get what they need, but also kind of counterbalance all those other stressors?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first here, B. I in-season training for us, I mean, consistency is one of the most important things. I think, it's easy with our schedule, where we actually just finished a stretch last night in Chicago where we played 6 games in 9 days. We had 2 3 and 4s as part of that. We had 2 home away back-to-backs as part of that, including this. We had Detroit at home 2 days ago, and then we were on the road in Chicago, where you have not just a pretty long flight after the game, but also you're dealing with time changes as well. So for us, we aim to get 2 full team training sessions in every week. We have a lot of players that will do additional work on top of that. We're very conscious of minimizing next day fatigue and soreness. So we really try to lean into a least effective dose approach, where, the actual training session itself may be 15 minutes. We might have 2 blocks of 3 exercises, give or take a couple, where there's an upper body and lower body push and pull with some hip and core work integrated into that. And for us, it's a matter of it doesn't take a large volume of stimulus to be able to maintain peak capacity. So it's a matter of progressively ramping up to higher intensities, whether that's intensity as far as load and approaching more of a maximum strength stimulus, or intensity from a speed standpoint, and making sure that we're touching maximum velocities, maximum power outputs, and maximum strength stimuli fairly consistently throughout the season. And there are definitely days where we are performing a training session with the intent of just maintaining a training presence, so that when we have a better opportunity to create a higher stimulus or a higher threshold stimulus, that it's not the first time a player's being exposed to that now in several weeks, and which would elicit more soreness and more fatigue in a larger recovery window. The post-game lifts, I think are, every team handles those a little bit differently. We do that quite a bit, but it's schedule dependent. So, for us, I sit down with Tim Labathier, who's been my assistant the last several years, actually a former Brijesh disciple as well, spent some time at Quinnipiac with B. But we sit down and we look at the next month, the calendar with the game schedule, and we just plan out what days we want to train, what we want the emphasis on those days to be, and then we start to map out our training for the month. But it's a little different from even my experience with youth or junior programs, where you're writing out more traditional training phases for a block of time. For us, it's more about kind of rotating a speed, power, and strength driven stimulus, and then again recognizing that different players on the roster would benefit from spending more time at one end or the other of the force velocity continuum, and trying to build in more work for those areas. So the post game training, when you can get that stimulus in, that is the longest time and the largest window for them to recover before the next game. So there are, obviously there's a fatigue element to that too. If we have players that are playing 20 to 25 minutes and they come off and they're gassed and the quality of training wouldn't be very high, then it may not be a good opportunity. But for a lot of other players, you're playing 12 to 15 minutes, even, not to, certainly not to imply that that's easy at any level, especially not this one, but, you're doing 12 minutes of activity across a 2.5, 3 hour time span. There's still some more gas in the tank, and we can get a quality training stimulus in and then still have enough time to recover before the next practice or game. So that's kind of the way we approach it.
Okay.
The way I kind of look at in-season training is to almost do the opposite of what they're doing. And what's really nice for us is we typically play Fridays and Saturdays. So we're going to get 2 good training sessions in a week. Sometimes with some individuals, we can get a 3rd training session, and some people even get in 4 training sessions a week, depending on how much they're playing, where they fall in terms of what they need from a developmental standpoint. But when I talk about doing the opposite, when we look at the sport, typically what's going to happen when we practice, it's going to be high volume, right? We're going to spend a lot of time on the ice. So typically what we're going to do in the gym is going to be low volume.
Okay.
It's going to be low load in terms of the equipment that they're going to wear. It doesn't really cost them a lot in terms of external load that's being placed upon their body. So the things that we're going to do are going to be a little bit more high load, so we can maintain a high level of motor unit recruitment, so we can keep their strength at a high level. And ultimately that's going to help improve their power and speed down the stretch when we need it the most. And then the last thing that we want to really emphasize is on the ice, they typically go through moderate ranges of motions, like to perform their tasks and skills. So we want to make sure that we do exercise in the gym that require them to go through full range of motion, so we can keep their mobility, because usually what starts to happen throughout a season is you're going to develop adaptive stiffness, because you're doing so many high volume repetitions of the same patterns over and over and over again. And taking that approach to what we do from an in-season training standpoint helps drive the goal of keeping our athletes the healthiest that we can. Because for us, we need to have our athletes available to be able to put us in the best chance to win on a weekend, and ultimately to put ourselves in the best position for playoff seeding and hopefully NCAA tournament seeding too. So that's kind of like the way we look at things from an in-season approach, but the college model lends to really good developmental training sessions. But that's how we kind of pick and choose exercise and approach that we kind of take with developing the athletes.
Very good. Very informative. I'll tell you what, guys, this has been a very interesting conversation. I think for everyone tuning in, listening, that is in the hockey world, but maybe some people that aren't as familiar and just want to learn a little more about it. And for all of those listeners, especially if you haven't got your copy, make sure to grab your copy of Strength Training for Hockey. It's available on the Human Kinetics website, us.humankinetics.com. I know it's also on Amazon, many more places as well. Like I said, if you are a strength coach, a hockey coach, a hockey player, or just someone that wants to learn more about the sport and the nuances that some of the nuances that we talked about as far as training for hockey, definitely get your copy. I know all the contributors did an excellent job from what I've seen. There are sections within the book about testing and assessments, program design guidelines, exercise technique and demonstrations, sample programs for off-season, preseason, in-season, postseason. You're going to get so much information in addition to everything that Brijesh and Kevin talked about today. So thanks so much for your time. I will actually give you guys the last word here to kind of wrap it up. Any concluding thoughts, and maybe let the listeners where they can follow you to continue learning from both of you.
I'm pretty easy to find on social media. I'm just at Kevin Neeld on every platform, and then I have a website that's just kevinneeld.com. So more than happy to connect with people and answer any questions and engage in the dialogue. So look forward to touching base.
Yeah, pretty easy to find too. B Patel 515 and my own website, coachbpatel.com. And just to wrap up, I just really appreciate anybody that took the time to tune in right now to listen to us, but also anybody that decides to pick up a copy of the book, regardless if you work in hockey, if you work in other sports, I think anybody that picks up is going to find a lot of benefits from it.